I'm a guy that's 24. Each day I build some more. I like the sequels. I'm Rich Boy J. Hello boyos, Rich Boy J here, back in with another video, and today I am here to reveal to you this big secret project that I've been working on for quite some time now. I've literally been working on this thing non-stop for the past 2 weeks, which is why I haven't really been active on this channel, but I think it was worth the wait. I think it was worth the effort, and I can finally present to you my custom minifig scale Razor Crest from The Mandalorian. If you guys are not aware, today is Mandalorian Day. The show is launched on Disney+. I checked out the first episode this morning, and I gotta say, I liked it. I liked it a lot, actually. It was a new, refreshing take on Star Wars, and I'm pretty excited to see what happens moving forward in the show. I also want to say, if you're new to the channel, I recommend you go and check out my other mocks. I'm currently working on a giant Starkiller base mock, and I've done some other cool stuff in the past. So let's talk about this build. I knew the moment they showed off this vehicle at Star Wars Celebration, I wanted to build it. It is eerily reminiscent of the Republic gunship, and I love that about it. The Republic gunship is my favorite vehicle in all of Star Wars, and this is a cool alternative to it. I believe in canon, both of these vehicles are actually from the same era, so it makes sense that they share some design similarities. As for this Lego build, it is surprisingly big. It's 20 inches from front to back, 18 inches wide, and 9 inches tall. I think this build ended up at a little under 4,000 pieces, which is ridiculous. That means this model is quite heavy. It isn't too heavy to like carry or maneuver around, but anyone who picks it up will notice that it has quite a bit of weight to it. It has a nearly complete interior featuring the cockpit as well as the main hull area interior. I actually designed most of this before the show premiered, so while I have watched it today and noted a few things that I do want to add to it, I do want to say the model that I came up with was not too far off actually, which definitely pleased me considering the lack of reference material I had to work on designing this thing. Before I really jump into the review, I also want to say I will be distributing the LDD files to this vehicle, so if you guys are interested in that, shoot me an email to my email in the description. I hope to have those finished by this weekend, and I will let you know the moment they are done so you can build one of these bad boys for yourself. Let's first go ahead and take a quick tour around the vehicle. So it's kind of hard to maneuver this thing because it's so large. I had to actually put it pretty far back to get the entire thing in view of the camera, but here's a view of the side profile. This was really just one of the things that was kind of hard to nail down the general shape of it because I didn't have any reference materials of this ship from this angle when I was designing it. So I really had to just try to piece together a bunch of different pieces of reference material. But watching the show today, I think that the general shape of this thing is near perfect for a Lego build, so it actually makes me quite happy. This was quite the difficult ship to design. Like, as you notice, as I move this thing around, there are a lot of like intricate angles and some interesting techniques that I kind of had to use to accomplish a lot of the angles and hull panels on this design. We can rotate this thing so you can get a shot of the back side of this vehicle. I really love this view of the vehicle for a couple of reasons. One, I feel this is one of the views that we saw a lot of in like the promotional material, like just the view of the ship flying from behind. This is one of the main views that we got, and I think that just the general like back profile of this ship is really true to what we've seen so far in the trailers and in the show today. And also, I just love how sleek this model is. I mean, it's a big model, but like the angles I feel just kind of come together perfectly. I'm specifically impressed with how I was able to have such like a narrow connection point from like the main body, and then like it's pretty thin right here, then it connects to these giant engines, and it's pretty sturdy. Like those engines aren't gonna fall off at all, and it just, I don't know, to me it kind of looks like Lego magic per se, having such like a narrow connection point and then these giant engines. It just, I don't know, really means a lot to me to have been able to accomplish that. If we come back around to the other side, you can see that it's mostly the same as the side before. One of the things that I unfortunately didn't implement, because I didn't even know it was a feature on this, is there should be a door on this side. There is a door on the other side. Once I really walk you through this model, you'll be able to see it, but unfortunately, I did not incorporate a door on this side of the build. It's not the worst thing in the world. Like, I already have the design for the other side, so it's not like I have to put too much thought into like redesigning this side of the build. but it is something that I'm going to have to change, add a door to this side. As to whether or not they actually use that door, I don't know, but it is there, so I want to incorporate it. And if we move him out of the way, we can swing back around to the other side of the front of the vehicle. And the one thing I do actually want to talk about was this just entire front assembly of this build. This was like a really difficult like section to design, specifically with like how there's this indenture here that goes around this main part. Like, I want to show you guys in a little bit kind of how this all comes apart, because there are actually lights in this build, and you pull this front section off to access the battery box. But that was kind of a difficult thing to design, like with these angles coming around here, the two front like cross beams for the window, and like the main console that's connected to this part because it has to like be consistent with the cockpit. Those are just some kind of difficult things I really had to figure out on this build, but it all came together actually pretty well, I think. To give you guys a better understanding of the size of this vehicle, here it is next to the UCS Slave 1. So you can see it's a pretty beefy boy. Like, it's a big build. It's like twice the amount of pieces as the Slave 1, and it's definitely quite bigger than it. All right, so now we can freehand it and really dive into the details on this build. So like I was just saying, this entire assembly up front was quite difficult to figure out. You can see there's just some really intricate angles that are built into this, and it had to kind of, you know, be round around the front section, be consistent with the top, but then also have some space like directly behind it to incorporate that console for the cockpit. It all came together surprisingly well. One thing I'm actually super proud of on this build is the actual cockpit. So the way to access it is it's actually pretty simple. You basically just kind of want to fold these two forward. It's a little dark in there, but you can see we have the main chair for the Mandalorian himself, so you can see he has some controls. I know people are super particular when it comes to having actual like controls and panels when it comes to a cockpit, so I made it a point to incorporate a lot of panels at various angles. I love specifically these two that are angled on the sides, and then the fact that he has like the main kind of controls up here on the front, I feel actually goes a long way. And there's actually a chair right there in the background in front of the door, so you can see that's actually a door right behind them. And I kind of took a risk on that because I wasn't really sure like what exactly was going to be behind them. There wasn't a great amount of reference material, but there is that door there. The door basically opens, and there's a ladder that goes from the top of this cockpit section down to the bottom of like the main hallway. But one thing I didn't know is there's actually a little chair kind of sitting behind him. And it's kind of a rinky-dink looking chair. You don't get a great view of it. But basically, and I guess this might be a little bit of a spoiler if you haven't seen the first episode yet. Like, maybe if you don't want to know anything about the show, then come back like here afterwards. So basically, he ends up taking a bounty, and the person who he captures actually just sits like right there behind him in a little red chair. So I thought, why not throw in that little red chair right there? That's actually something I did this morning right before I filmed this review. One thing I do want to say is it does look kind of out of place just looking at it. Like, I think if you had a character sitting there, it would look much better because it's like the only red thing on this mock other than maybe those lights down there. But I thought it was a cool little addition to throw back there, and the character will actually fit in like kind of over in that corner if you choose to sit a character there. But we don't want to see that. We want to see our main guy right here, the actual Mandalorian. If you want to fold him up, you can actually slide him in his chair like so. And boom, he's in there, and you are good to go. He actually looks quite awesome sitting in there in that cockpit, so I am super happy with that. It really does just complete the vehicle, having the main character piloting everything and holding the controls. Actually, I don't know, I like that he actually has those physical controls that he can put his hands around, put his little Lego hands around. But moving on a little closer to the backside, there are these main guns that sit on the side of this build. One of the things I was quite surprised at, but pleasantly surprised at, was like how similar this like assembly right here is to the guns on the face of the AT-AT. Like, I'll actually pull up a picture right now, And you can see like the guns on the sides of the AT-AT head actually look pretty similar to this. So that was kind of a cool little consistency across the Star Wars vehicles. But I think I did a pretty solid job. This is one of the things I'm probably actually going to do a little bit of tweaking to. I didn't have great reference material of these cannons at all. Like all the shots I had were either from a weird angle or just the resolution wasn't very good. So I'm probably going to tweak a few things on it. But I think for the most part, it actually looks pretty good. It's a pretty solid looking cannon on the side of this vehicle. If we move over to this side, like I mentioned earlier, and as you saw probably in the intro of this video, there is a door. It's actually like pretty well hidden. I think if you didn't know that like the door was supposed to see there, you might miss it, but you can actually just kind of dig your fingernail in there and pull the door down. And there's actually this like little gray section sitting right here. One of the things I realized is that when this door folds down, there's a section that slides out of it. I can't really replicate that in Lego, at least not with this slim form factor. So I just incorporated this little gray extension piece that you would basically just kind of connect to the end of this. And this is not easy to do with one hand, but you connect it like that. And then you could actually have what the door is supposed to look like with the extended section. And the nice thing about having this stud right here is it actually allows you to position a minifig on it. So it kind of serves a dual purpose where one, it can just kind of hold this gray piece on it so you don't have to like have it somewhere else. It can just kind of stay with the ship and be hidden. But then also it allows you to like stand a minifigure on here and have them, I guess, kind of either coming into or coming out of the ship. So I actually like that quite a bit. One other thing I wanted to highlight are these stripes and just the yellow detailing on the side of the vehicle in general. This is mostly a gray ship, as you can tell, but one of the cool like defining factors are these yellow patterns on the side of it. I don't know what they mean, but they're there, so I tried my best to incorporate them. This design right here was so difficult to come up with, and it was kind of a last minute thing, and I actually pull up a picture here. And you can see in this photo that my original plan was to just kind of brick build the two lines there on a grid, and then I realized like it doesn't look nearly as good as it should, nearly as uniform as it should, so I instead opted to really figure out some like weird just snot techniques to kind of squeeze in this this panel right here, this like 3 wide brick panel that kind of sits in there at an angle, and it ended up looking much better than what I started out with. So I'm actually quite happy with it. The fact that there aren't very many gaps surrounding it is an accomplishment for sure, because this was not an easy thing to figure out. You can see there are just so many pieces kind of smudged in there, but the nice thing is that they're all connected. There's not any single piece that's like not connected via a stud, so the fact that I was able to accomplish that is actually a really big deal. For the actual vehicle, these stripes should go all the way to the top and all the way to the bottom, but there was no way for me to do that and still kind of preserve the structural integrity of this side panel. So I opted to just have it in some capacity here, and then you can see that it kind of continues up on top of the main hull. So the fact that I incorporated that, I think, is a big deal, and I actually love the way that design came out. We move a little towards the back, we get a look at the landing gears, and I'm pretty happy with this design as well. I do want to say that the landing gears on this vehicle are actually only slightly functional. My original plan was to just have the ship sit on these landing gears, and then I realized as more and more weight was added to it, like I didn't even get to the engines, because even without the engines being on it, like just the body of the ship was too much weight to support these landing gears, because they kind of stick so far out from the body of the ship, and they were just like, it was just sinking way too much, and if you put like literally any extra weight on it, it would just kind of collapse on itself. I did try tinkering around with making the legs a little bit stronger. Then I realized it wasn't even about the legs not being strong, but instead just the way the body of the ship is constructed, like the fact that this panel is only 1 stud wide, to be able to incorporate an interior meant that it's not like a super sturdy wall. So as the weight of the ship got heavier, it was basically pushing down, and it would basically just like make the part where the legs were connected to the wall literally just like fall right out. So wasn't really working out that way. So I thought rather than having a ship that I wasn't really comfortable with or one that could break easily, I just decided to add some clear bricks at the bottom of it. The thing about that is they're actually pretty well hidden. Like, I think most people looking at this wouldn't even know they're down there unless you really got under there to look at it. But what it meant for the overall design of this ship was that it's a lot safer to deal with. Like, you can push down on it. It's not going to collapse on itself. And the landing gears do still touch the ground, so they look functional. So I didn't have to preserve, the aesthetic of them. I can still have them look as they should, but they're not susceptible to the large weight of this model, and it's not going to collapse on itself. So in an ideal world, I would have just been able to have strong enough legs, but I want to have the interior and not compromise that. Before we swing around to the back, I did actually just want to show you real quick how you activate the lights on this model. So what you do is actually just pull this front section right here off of the build. You can see in there is a power functions battery box, so everything in this build is still Lego, and you can go ahead and pull that out. Just hit the green button, the lights are initiated, and then you can basically just push this back on the front of the ship. Once again, this is not easy to do with one hand. I'm going to try my best to get this to stay on here. And now we have lights. So I incorporated the 2 lights on the front of the build, which look pretty awesome. At some point, I would maybe take a look into somehow trying to illuminate the lights on the top of the engines as well as the back of the engines. That's just something I would consider, but there are actually lights on the inside of this. So I can first give you a quick peek at it from the side here. Boom. We got some lights in there, so that's kind of cool. And then we can actually go ahead and close that back up and swing around to the backside. Now, if we come back around to the backside of the vehicle, we can see we actually have the back boarding ramp and lights on the interior. I went ahead and threw in a couple of those carbonite Han pieces to kind of represent a few of his bounties that he captured. That's actually something we saw in the trailer and was a pretty cool thing to incorporate. Obviously, it'd be nice if we actually had different carbonite people frozen as like a piece in Lego, but we don't, so I thought Han would suffice here. And you can see, you can kind of get a look at the ceiling in there. The ceiling on the interior is actually like fully snot. Actually, here, if I pull this back, so you can get a look at it there. So that's actually pretty nicely detailed. I put some greebling pieces. Like you can see, there's like a light gray nozzle kind of coming out of the ceiling in there. And the lights, I think, just look incredible. Like, that is just so cool to me. And if you're not happy with this view, there are actually 2 options. One, this back panel actually pulls off pretty easily, so you can get an even better look at the interior. Because I realize, like, for one, it's kind of under the engines and under this back section, so it's kind of hard to get a view of the interior, so I made that to be able to be pulled out pretty easily. If you're not happy with that view either, there's actually this panel over here on the side that you can actually go ahead and pull out, and boom, you got a view of both of the carbonite pieces. It would be great if this section in here was tall enough to where you could stand them up straight. Unfortunately, that is not the case. So they're at a bit of a slant, but it doesn't look out of place. They just look like they're stuck in there at a slant. So that's just kind of what I had to come up with for that. And you can also just kind of see further down the hallway. And I'm just so excited about this. So this makes me so happy. Not only that the lights are in there, but that the interior of this thing just looks so good, especially with the ceiling that I had actually put a decent amount of work into. So you can actually just go ahead and close the back of this back up, put that panel in there, and then for this, you just, it's kind of hard to do with one hand. It's going to be the theme of this video, but it sticks right there, and then you can close the back up, and boom, you're good to go. One thing that I'd like to probably work on is fixing the fact that the lights kind of bleed a little bit out of the bottom, but that's not a huge issue. In fact, it looks kind of cool. It's like this thing has neon lights on the bottom of it, but that is something that I'll probably look at down the line. But if we just are taking more looks at the details on this thing, these panels here, just everything, like all these angles were such an effort for me to try to figure out here, especially kind of coming towards the back. But if we look at the front here, you can see the angles really come together at a nice sharp point, which is what I was really going for, because this section specifically right here is a very thin section per se, and it doesn't translate into an obvious Lego build, so I wanted to make sure a lot of these angles fit together really nicely, and I think I mostly accomplished that. So you can see on the underside here, there's just this large kind of slanted panel that goes from the front to the back. There's an underside look at the wing area, or the area that just connects to the engine. And then around back, there's the section that kind of protrudes out, and then there's some nice little rebling pieces in there as well. So all in all, I just love the form factor, and I think that what I built here is really true to the actual shape of the model. That was the most important thing, especially for a ship that I had limited reference material to, a ship that I had never actually seen on screen or in anything before. Just making sure that the shape of it was correct, and that I wouldn't like launch this video the day Mandalorian comes out and it's like, oh, that doesn't really look like it. So I'm really happy with that. If we come up to the top, we get a look at the greebling section in here. I really like the way that came out. It's a nice contrast to the mostly light grays of the build. It's dark gray. There's some greebling pieces in there, so I'm happy with it. This was really just a lot of guesswork. Like, I literally had no pictures of what that greebling might look like, and even from the episode this morning, still have no idea. So as we move forward, this design in here might change depending on if we get some good shots of it. And I'm also super happy with the way this section came out. This is actually accurate. I got a decent photo of this. Surprisingly, I could see this, but not this. But that arch in there, just the way this like section kind of, the way this indented section kind of is cut out of there, just looks really nice to me. And then there's some like weathering right behind it. And then there's even more greebling up on the front towards the cockpit. Speaking of which, we can also take a closer look at the top of this. So this was one of the sections I actually spent quite a bit of time on, because for one, it's the cockpit, right? It's like the first thing that your eyes are kind of drawn to as you look at this build, and it was super important for me to just get this entire section right here looking correct. And this piece right here was a savior. That actually, I think, was key to making this thing look accurate, because the cockpit comes up, but then it kind of levels off towards the top. So just figuring that out in this build was quite a task, but I think that it actually came out looking pretty good. Then the last thing we can talk about are, of course, the engines. The engines are one of the most noticeable things about the ship itself and this build, because they're so huge. They're just these two giant engines that protrude from the sides of this ship, and I love the way they came out. The engines were basically the last thing I built and designed for this model, and they really just made everything come together once I finally got them attached. So there's a lot going on with these engines. Starting off, like, the engine is basically a big hexagon build with these curved slopes attached to it to make it look circular. And that took forever to figure out. Like, I experimented with so many potential designs to get just a circle with a big enough diameter to be accurate to the size of the Razor Crest. And I ended up with like a hexagon base and then the curved slopes around it. So it ended up actually working out pretty well. As for the front area here, this is just a bunch of 1x3 curved slopes attached to some flex tubing. And the flex tubing is just kind of connected at a circle, and then it creates this shape right here on the front, which I love. I just love the way all of this in this section right here comes together. I also incorporated this little section right here at the bottom. I don't really know what to call it. It's just a detail on the engines, kind of protrudes out from the bottom, but it's accurate. It's supposed to be there, so I'm glad I was able to incorporate it. One of the things that happened that will really just cause me to have these designs in here was the fact that I think I started off with like this circle using the 1x3 curve slopes, and then I realized like the engine is like kind of protrudes out at certain sections. So I was like, okay, I need to either make part of it come out more or come out or go in more. So I ended up just basically deciding this is going to be the protruding section, and then I kind of brought the sections in the middle of this in some. And then that created this gap right here. You can see with the 1x3s, there was no issue. There's no gap there. But with the 1x2s there, that is a gap. So I had to fill it in basically using these 1x1 tiles with the clip on the top. It's kind of a complicated assembly, but maybe some people out there will understand what the heck I meant by that. And then there's the back. The back of this engine is easily the most complicated part of it, but I think it's the best looking part of it. For one, just having this section that kind of, slants inward was so cool. I was so happy I was able to figure that out. I think it looks incredible. And then there's also this, like, I don't even know what you'd call it, but basically there's section right here that's kind of a circle that's still conical. It's still kind of, it's sloping inwards, but it kind of tapers off right here to form another circle, which, man, those cheese slopes really came in handy for that. And overall, it just looks so nice back here. I think everything flows together super well, and that was really the goal for this ship. I didn't want, with how like nicely the angles for the body came together, I wanted to continue that on the engine, and I think I did that. One kind of unintended effect was I needed these 1x1 lamp holder pieces to basically kind of come together to allow me to have a stud going that way and a stud going this way, which meant they had to come in towards the engine. But that's actually accurate. There's like these spokes that come in on the engine on the back. So it actually ended up being a nice like detail of the MOC. So it's kind of nice when you have those unintended effects, like you need a piece to accomplish something and then you end up figuring out like, oh, it actually looks like something else that's supposed to be there. So I was actually super happy with that. And then one of the fun things about like just building these engines was a lot of discoloration. So you'll see, it's not solid. It's not a solid color by any means. There's a lot of dark grays and even some dark tans thrown in there to represent rusting. And I think overall it just combines to make a really nice looking engine build on both sides of this vehicle. And the engines are important. Like if the engines didn't work on this build, like if they were too small or too big, I think the entire build wouldn't really work. So I was super happy that they came together so well, and all in all, we ended up with what I think is a pretty incredible looking build. So this has been my super secret project. I wanted to launch this thing, have it be a surprise to all of you on Mandalorian Day. So I hope all of you enjoyed the show. I hope you all enjoyed this build as well. Like I said earlier, if you want to build one of these on your own, shoot me an email. I will be selling the LED files to this so you can build one of these bad boys, and I'm super excited to have this in my collection. This definitely, this is a Mandalorian MOC, right? But this opens up the possibilities to me for doing like an actual Mandalorian like location MOC. I've seen a couple things even on the first episode that I might like to build. I want to hold off on it until I see maybe a little bit more, something that actually like incorporates this in like an action sequence, maybe kind of incorporating the Razor Crest on land. I don't know, but the fact that I have this right now on day one of The Mandalorian is awesome to me. I think it is a cool looking ship in canon, and I think it makes an even cooler looking Lego build. So hope that my inactivity on my channel is worth it for you guys. Definitely let me know in the comment section below. What do you think of this build? If I have to say so, I think this is probably the best vehicle build that I've designed. Because, for one, there was just a total lack of reference material, right? Like, I had to have this design prepared for day one of the show coming out. And then two, it's just really unlike anything else I've had to design in terms of like scale, in terms of the angles, in terms of just certain build techniques I had to incorporate, like those lines I had to build into the side of the ship. There's just a lot of new things I tried with this vehicle, and it really just all came together. So if you like what I do, guys, go ahead, support the video by hitting the like button, support the channel by smashing that subscribe button, and I'll be back again very soon.